Ain't happening. Joe Burrow is never going to make it back to the Super Bowl with the Cincinnati Bengals. And that is not a criticism of the quarterback. It's really more so a judgment of the franchise. Since Mike Brown became the owner of the Bengals, and I understand he was an executive with Cincinnati before he did take over and have ownership over the team, that happened in 1991. Since he became the owner of the Bengals and became the guy in the big chair making all of the major decisions, the Brown family obviously is world-renowned out there in Ohio. Cincinnati has not made the Super Bowl ever outside of the 1 year that Joe Burrow and the Bengals made that magical run that came out of nowhere. That was it. Since 91, that's what, 33, 34 years? How long is that? That's a long time.
It's a while.
So this is a franchise that has historically not been one that has been heavily competent, that has been highly competitive, and nor have they been one to be considered, let's just say, generous with the bread. They're a little stingy with the dough. They're known for being frugal. In fact, it's weird to me, C-Cat, because a lot of times you wouldn't hear it from former players of a franchise or organization. Like, think about it. We know our good guy, Pierre Garçon, very well. He's a West Palm native. He played at Mount Union. Then he went on to the NFL, played for the Colts, played in huge games. He finished his career, I believe, with the Commanders out there in Washington and whatnot. And everybody talks poorly of the Washington football franchise, especially the previous ownership. Pierre would never say a bad word about them. He never does. He always says that he had a great time and a great relationship there, though a lot of what we heard following Dan Snyder's ownership was the exact opposite. People generally don't openly speak, especially publicly, poorly about ownerships of NFL franchises, partially because of the amount of power that these guys have, but also maybe it's because they cut the checks for them in so many ways. But for some odd reason, the Cincinnati Bengals ownership, they get dunked on everywhere, including inside the state of Ohio and especially on the national airwaves. Like, have you ever heard anybody say anything positive about the Bengals outside of, I like Joe Burrow and Tee Higgins and Jamar Chase?
Kay Adams likes Cincinnati. That's all I know. Kay Adams is a big Bengals fan. That's all I got. She was along for the ride during that Bengals Super Bowl run. That's the only voice.
I actually feel bad for not just Joe Burrow, but for Bengals fans, because I believe the issues in Cincinnati extend beyond Joe Burrow not being a top 3 quarterback in his own conference. It extends beyond their defense being porous this year and allowing them to get into so many shootouts that they were not able to edge out and get wins in. This is a ownership problem in Cincinnati. And even though we just got the great news from Graziano, the salary cap is going to be up about $30 million from last year or so. The Bengals should have the room to not only re-sign Higgins, re-sign Chase, re-sign Trey Hendrickson, but damn it, maybe they could take a swing at Myles Garrett across the way in Cleveland, who wants to be on a contender. They could do all of this, but history tells us that they won't. And if we're going to keep ignoring that, if we're going to keep on giving them the benefit of the doubt, I think we're doing a disservice to exactly what the Bengals franchise has shown us. It's not like we haven't seen this story before, right? Tee Higgins got franchise tagged last offseason. And Joe Burrow, at the end of this year, Joe Burrow at his end-of-season press conference, C-Cat, when he should be talking about, how we want to get back together, practice, build, fortify this locker room, and make sure that we have what it takes to return next season and make it to where we want to go. Instead, Joe Burrow is standing behind the mic talking to the press and begging his ownership to pay that man.
When you have a guy like that, you just can't let him get out of the building. He's a one-of-a-kind person, one-of-a-kind player, and one that we really count on and is an integral part of what we do around here. So hopefully we can make that happen.
He's talking about Tee Higgins. He's talking about Tee Higgins, who has been an excellent receiver for the Bengals. He helps that offense go. In fact, when Joe Burrow, Tee Higgins, and Jamar Chase share the field together, in the last 28 games, C-Cat, they're 20-8. That's above a 70% winning percentage. That's a playoff team.
Yeah, we saw this year how poorly the Bengals began, and Tee Higgins was on the shelf, injured for a lot of the beginning of the season.
Yes. And when Higgins come back, they start to look a lot more competent, and he has for the amount of games he played, a career type year. The kind of year that you would want from a guy who is looking to get paid and deserves to get paid. And the fact he was able to put up good numbers in a limited amount of games while also the other dude got the freaking triple crown, right? Like, that's the part that slept on. Jamar Chase led the league in receptions, yards, and touchdowns. Yet and still, Tee Higgins able to put up 911 yards, 10 touchdowns, and had 73 receptions in a year where he actually played a limited amount of games and played through injury. Higgins is 26-year-old. He's done everything to prove to this franchise he deserves to be a long-term building block and a guy that gets paid handsomely. We've seen it for other teams, the Eagles and the Dolphins, both paying two receivers $30+ million. Eagles just won a Super Bowl. The Dolphins are having their struggles, but that's more so because the quarterback was unavailable this year. The Bengals couldn't even make the postseason, and now they're in a situation where they're tagging Tee Higgins again, not rewarding the player for him providing excellence on the field. This is going to fracture that locker room if they don't pay that man this year. If they don't exact an actual long-term extension with Tee Higgins, I don't see how that's not going to hurt the confidence and the continuity within that locker room, because I do think it sends a bad message, C-Cat, to the other guys. What it's telling them is, hey, Tee Higgins is one of the best players in the league, a Pro Bowler, a guy that played through injury and helped us to a lot of wins and gave it his all. And how has this franchise rewarded him for that? How have my bosses rewarded an employee who I know is better than me and has exuded an amount of excellence that you would think deserves to get a pay scale raise, and they haven't gotten it to him? That's going to hurt team morale.
I guess so, because would you prefer them to sell Tee Higgins to test the open market instead? Would that be a better move from Bengals ownership and a better message to the locker room?
Yes, because the franchise tag should be illegal anyways. I hate the franchise tag. What other sport do we have an idiotic system like that? The NFL purports itself as a place that has free agency, but it also, to be honest with you, it's almost the exact opposite. The things that franchise tags has done both to the running back position and also other guys throughout the league in the past decade, especially as the money that we see other guys get paid long term has gone through the roof. I mean, I'm not sure. I don't understand, and I'd have to go back and look at the history of it. Why the hell did the NFLPA agree to that crap? But anyways, he's franchise tagged for the second straight year, T is. Mm-hmm. And you're right. Yeah, like you just said, he deserves to get a long-term and financial security down the line. And I do think if I'm his teammate, let's say I'm Chase Brown, right? I'm the running back in this backfield, and I'm putting my body on the line for real, for real. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm taking a lot of hits. I'm taking the brunt end of it. I have the shortest, lifespan of any of the skill positions in the NFL. Like, what do I think about how my production could actually turn into pennies? Trey Hendrickson just led the leagues in sacks, and we still haven't heard anything on an extension for him. They're not rewarding anybody outside of Joe Burrow right now, and that comes from a history of this franchise being cheap. And I don't think that this new news of the salary cap spiking is going to help them at all. In fact, there are a lot of people that are hoping they turn a new leaf. You talked about Kay Adams, who's a big Bengals fan. On Up and Adams, she had Hall of Fame receiver Chris Carter. Also has some FAU ties, right? A little Trey Hendrickson love here. Chris Carter was on, and he's hope casting that the Bengals change their ways.
Cincinnati's trying to do things they've never done before. They don't guarantee money in the second year. I mean, they Joe Burrow said he was the only player. So you have to throw away that model because you can't sign Chase and you can't sign Higgins without guaranteeing money into the second year. So their business model, they're going to have to tear it up for them to be functional because that division is not getting any easier.
Why would I believe they're going to change anything? Why would I believe that they're going to actually supply Joe Burrow with the kind of roster he's going to need to be able to compete in the AFC and to be able to return to the Super Bowl stage? The Bengals and Burrow will never together make it back to the Super Bowl, and it has nothing to do with Burrow's play and everything to do with that franchise's inability to get out of its own way.